another episode of What the Fuck Paranormal with the Naked Bigfoot. Well, What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. Gotta get the name right. I am your host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot, for those who don't already know me. I know. I started the show a minute early. You'll have to forgive me for that. But I was looking forward to tonight's topic, shadow people. It won out in the poll. We were almost going to talk about zombie hookers tonight. The poll I had on Twitter, for those who follow me on Twitter, know that I had a poll about what the topic of conversation would be tonight. And one of the topics to choose from was zombie hookers. So, hey, everybody who's just coming in. Thanks for coming on. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Um, you may trust me, you chose the right channel to watch tonight. We're gonna have a lot of fun tonight. But as I was saying on Twitter, I had a choice of of topics I let everybody vote on, and one of them was zombie hookers, and then there was shadow people and two others. And I thought for sure that zombie hookers was going to. Hey, Drew. Good to see you, sweetie. Good to see you. I get your messages. I am lazy about responding. Everybody will tell you how lazy I am with responding to messages that I get. I'm a bad messaging guy. So instead of zombie hookers, shadow people won out. We'll have to do zombie hookers next week. I know Chris wanted to hear about zombie hookers tonight. And I really do have a story associated with zombie hookers, so um, I will have to I will have to save that for a topic for another day. Okay. At the beginning of every show, I always give it a few minutes for people to go ahead and jump on. Um, is Christine on tonight? Say something, Christine, if you're on tonight. I was going to mention you tonight. Okay. Trying to think if there's any unfinished business or unfinished news that we need to talk about tonight before I begin the show. I don't believe there is anything. Well, there's always something. But it wouldn't be appropriate for tonight's conversation. Again, I want to welcome everybody who's just coming on tonight's show. I want to thank you again for coming on. I want to welcome all the first timers and of course all everybody who comes in and sees every show. I want to thank everybody who's going to be watching this as a replay show as well. Speaking of which, somebody needs to explain to me why my last week's chat has so many views attached to it. The one about the one entitled "The Time I Went Looking for the Jersey Devil." And everybody knows with my stories and with my experiences, there's always a twist to them. It always ends up. Most of my stories have a twist attached to them because that's how I experience them. I went looking for one thing and ended up finding something else, or if I went to experience one thing, ended up experiencing something else. But apparently that episode has touched a few people, so I appreciate everybody who's watched that. I really do. Oh God, Drew, I hope my name's not getting out. Ugh. That would be vaguely inappropriate. Don't look too close at my face either. I'm incredibly blotchy tonight. Ugh. Looks like I have scabies or something. Okay. Let's start the show. As everybody knows, my show, to do the disclaimers as I always do my disclaimers. Um, my show is not meant to dissuade, persuade, or alter your perceptions of religion or any values that you hold dear. I am merely here to educate and entertain. If by watching one of my shows you feel inspired to go out and explore this beautifully mystical, paranormal, wild, and fascinating world that we live in, I feel that I have done my job. But if you do go forward to explore this wild and crazy world, do not do the crazy things that I did. Do not use me as an example. Please do so sanely and safely. Do not want you to go out to take risks that you're not prepared to deal with, or risks that are dangerous to both yourself physically, spiritually, and mentally. I want you to be safe when your explorations out there of the strange and unusual. Because I'd love to hear the stories that you have to share with it. There's Christine. Hey, Christine. It's good to see you on tonight, Christine. For those who do not know, Christine Day is, if she doesn't mind me saying this, is from Australia. Um, I have quite an international group of people who watch. Um, from Scotland, Ireland, England, South Africa, even, and all throughout the United States. I have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful following, and I love you guys for it. All my international friends out there. Also, for those who are new to my show who don't know so already, if you have any small kids in the room, I do ask, and you do not wish for them uh, to hear um, any naughty words or naughty language or suggestive language, or hear me describe scenes, terrifying scenes, or sometimes bloody scenes. Um, I do ask that you have your child or children leave the room or wear headphones while you're watching my show. If you happen to be offended by some of the things that may come out of my mouth, I will not apologize for it, but I will say this. Usually when I do say bad words, it's part of my vernacular. It just happens. I do try to restrain myself as much as possible, but sometimes it just happens and it comes out of my mouth. I do hope that you can look past that and enjoy my show the way it's presented. Sorry, I'm just reading a few comments. You guys know I love interacting with you during the lives here. I just love interacting with you. Um, Also, on our show, on my show, I say our show like it. I think that this show is just not something I do. I think for everybody who watches it, I want to believe that it's our show. We're all part of. For those whoever watched Are You Afraid of the Dark? Um, that used to come on Nickelodeon. I think it's trying to make a comeback now. I think of all of you being a part of the Midnight Society, and that we meet here once or twice a week, and you get to hear my tale. I present you my tale as a member of the Midnight Society. So I always think that as my show as being our show, for those who do not know. um, but for those who are not aware of it, and for those who are aware of it, just as a friendly reminder, we do play a drinking game on my show. Anytime you hear me say that's a story for another time, or that's a story for another day, or any incarnation of that phrase, please take a sip or shot of your adult beverage. Um, if you do not imbibe adult beverages but wish to play along with the game tonight, please take a sip or drink of your beverage of choice, non-alcoholic beverage of choice. If you are drinking adult beverages tonight while we're playing this game, I do ask by the end of the show that since you will more than likely be incredibly drunk, please do not drink and drive. Please call for an Uber, have a friend drive you home, pass out on the couch, do anything but get on the road and drink while intoxicated. Again, that goes back to my be safe and be sane mantra. With that said, let's get on with tonight's show. Like I promised, we're going to be talking about shadow people. Um, and for those who are not used to my format of my show, I usually start off talking about subjects in general, and then I'll end it with my personal story concerning the topic in question, for the most part. So we'll do that again tonight. Now, shadow people, and I'm going to say that in quotation marks, shadow people have become quite trendy in paranormal circles. Using the phrase, shadow people. People are always seeing shadows, or always seeing shadow people, or shadow things, or shadows. Um, just like people, like poltergeists and demons. Those are the three biggest things you hear out there that I consider paranormal clickbait for people who, you know, are looking to attract attention. They want to talk about shadow people in general. Um, but I want to tell you my what I have discovered in my research and adventures, um, what shadow people are. Now, shadow people, in my experience and in my research, don't belong to one particular race or type. Shadow people can be broken down. And see, that's one of the mistakes. A lot of paranormal investigators and a lot of people who go out seeking the paranormal. Sometimes, and I'm not going to say that they're lazy, but it's a lazy to categorize, to um, take, a specific phenomenon and put it under and label it under a large umbrella. Um, for instance, negative spirits or negative activity. It must be demonic activity. Same thing with shadow people. Something that looks like a shadow that's vaguely humanoid in shape. They automatically categorize that as a shadow person without doing any research or investigation um, into what it may actually be. It may belong to that broad category of shadow people, but it's probably something more specific. And you don't treat everything that looks like a shadow person or can be called a shadow person the same way, or to deal with them the same way. Um, right now, it's, the popular belief is that you can't do anything with shadow people. When you see a shadow person, they will plague you until they're done plaguing you. They will never leave you alone. And for the most part, they're negative and they're there to harm you and scare you. Well, yeah, some of them do. Um, but then again, let's dig into this a little bit more. Okay. The types of things that can be categorized as shadow people. Um, there is now when you guys have heard me talk about once human, non-human, and unhuman spirits. Well, within those classes of spirit, there are subclasses of spirits um, that can be considered shadow people. Like for the once humans who maybe have died and didn't pass on. Um, which, if you don't mind me saying this, Christine, I'm going to use you as an example. Christine Day, we had a small chat in Twitter, not too long ago. Well, today, this afternoon, and she told me that her house that she lives in, she has shadow people, and they are quite friendly to her and her family, uh, which actually contradicts the clickbait wisdom that most paranormal investigators like to put out, saying that they're negative spirits. What I would like to say about Christine Day's shadow people is that they fall under those type of shadow people that were once human, um, that are not that were completely once human, that or that are not unhuman or inhuman. They fall under a more specific category. They're called shades. Some of you may not know what a shade is. Some of you may not, but I'll tell you what a shade is. Shade is a memory. It's a memory of life. It's a reflection of life, of a life. A shade is. Shades can be found throughout most belief systems throughout the world. Some form of a shade, but it was a human soul, a human life, somebody who passed away, but their soul has gone on to whatever afterlife they believe in, but they have left I don't want to say echo, but I'll say echo, an echo of themselves behind. There was an echo. That's how their life force was that strong. Their energy was that strong. That when their soul was released from their body, that energy that came from that release produced a shade. Shades are somewhat intelligent. If the person was a kind person in life, then the shade would be a friendly shade. In the death of that person, the shade they would create would be friendly, helpful. If they were a nasty, foul human being during their life, that shade would inevitably be nasty and foul, and people would interact with it poorly. Again, shades are not super intelligent. They are a memory of the life that was. So they will go through and, you know, try to continue to live that life within that home or building, or even sometimes outside in forests and woodland areas where the shade was created at when the person died. Shades are capable of speech. They can say very short words and phrases. They can project short words and phrases. You can hear them. They can barely physically interact with the material world. They can move things around. They can make things disappear and reappear. Usually, when they disappear and you can't find something and a shade's involved in it, it's because when a shade puts its hand over something, again, this shadowy memory, when it envelops it in its energy, you can't see it. It's when it lets it go and lets it drop back into our physical world that you can see it again. So, in a sense, it has disappeared. If it is a shade of someone who was malicious in life, they delight in terrifying people. They delight in, being that shadow in the corner that scares people, that wakes people up in their sleep as it's whispering the person that's sleeping's name. They just do things to be irritating. You cannot exercise or get rid of a shade. Shades generally do not follow people from location to location. If you leave a house in which a shade was born in, they generally will not follow you to another location. The shades are tied to that point to where they died at. They, I always tell people it's like the Beetlejuice rules, where whatever house you died in, you can't walk outside the door and interact with the rest of the world whatsoever. Probably going to get sued for that. Again, shades can interact with people, and they generally do interact with people. They want to. Shades can make them, again, they are reflections. They are the shadow that was created, that memory, a shadow of a memory of that person's life that was created upon their death. They can make themselves pull together this shadowy essence of themselves together to look like a silhouette, to look like something vaguely human or humanoid. They may create for themselves a hat. They may create them for themselves a set of eyes, sometimes a mouth, sometimes fingers, but they rarely can do all of them at the same time. They just don't have the ability to do that. Again, we're not dealing with something that's super intelligent whatsoever, but again, they were once human. They try to mimic what they look like. Now, shades can also use that substance, that memory substance that they've created, that shadowy substance that makes up their bodies. They can appear as different things. They can look like other animals. They can look like a shadowy dog. They can look like a shadowy cat. They can look like a large bird. They can look like a bat. Um, they can merge with the shadows around them to become, they can, if it's a bed that's casting a shadow on the wall, they can incorporate themselves within that shadow and hide. Most of the time they do that when, they, again, we're dealing once human entities, um, when they're frightened. Usually the shades of children are the most tragic because they're the ones that are the most frightened. Again, they not very intelligent, think that they're alive, can be easily frustrated when they're trying to interact with people and find that they can't. Um, and they can throw little tantrums. They can knock stuff off of stuff. Um, they can knock bottles over, or they can, open a cabinet or a door slightly and slam it. Um, but you're dealing with a child, a small child. Uh, Again, a small child that's maybe not that intelligent, that's not that smart. That are frustrated because or cannot, they can't interact with you and you're not paying any attention to them. And I believe when Christine was telling me about that, Christine Day, when she was telling me about that, that what she had in her house, she had several of them in her house that were being friendly, that she was interacting with these reflections of memories of people who had died in that house or near in that house, and they had become shades, which again is most people would categorize as a type of shadow person. Um, if everybody's following along, if I'm not babbling too much. But a shade is one type of something that would fall under the category of shadow person. And now let's talk about unhuman shadow people. Those are the ones that most people love to talk about, are the unhuman ones. And this is my theory. Now, I said theory about them because I have had no experience with the unhuman type before. I've only heard the stories, which I found interesting. And I believe most of the stories when they're told to me because I couldn't categorize them as shades or anything else, or a shadow whelp. Ooh, probably shouldn't have said shadow whelp. I'll have to explain that. Maybe not tonight, but maybe another day, what a shadow whelp is. That's something dangerous. But that's a story for another day. I know everybody's been waiting for that. Um, but the unhuman forms of shadow people. Now, these things can follow people. They do attach themselves to people. They are mostly malicious in nature. It is and it's not just my belief, it's a lot of people's belief, that these unhuman, not inhuman, but unhuman, um, completely alien, and you'll understand why I'm using that word in a few moments, completely alien in their thoughts and logic and in their manners. Um, Good, Chris. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Or things that are interdimensional. Um, for those who have not heard or know of the theory of parallel universes, not parallel dimensions. Well, you could say parallel dimensions as well, but parallel universes. That there are universes that are adjacent to us, all around us. Um, and that things from these other universes and dimensions can interact in our world at specific points in our world, um, that are called mathematical improbabilities. Um, that things that when their world overlaps our world, it creates mathematical improbabilities, like non-Euclidean geometry, uh, angles that shouldn't exist. Like if you go into a house and you look into the corner of the house and all of the walls meet at a peculiar angle that doesn't quite make sense. You don't understand how that building can be, that roof can be, or those walls can be held up. Um, the way that angle is made in that wall. Well, what you could be looking at is a point in our dimension, in our universe, that's intersecting with another dimension or another universe, creating an improbable um, mathematical situation. And in these areas of improbability exists non Euclidean geometry. These things, a portal is created if you have sufficient energy, or if you have a body or a spirit that is able to move between dimensions that are caused in areas and dimensions that are caused by non Euclidean geometry and mathematical improbabilities. Um, they're able to do it. And I believe that one such race are the shadow people, these malicious shadow people that people are interacting with. I think these are hyperdimensional beings. Yeah, I went there. Everybody knows that I'm not a big UFO guy. But when it comes to these malicious shadow people, these shadow people that come out um, and harass people and follow people and try to harm people, um, this doesn't sound like something from our universe. It sounds like something hyperdimensional that's come from their world, their shadowy world, where their laws of physics completely differ from our laws of physics. They exist as these bundles of energy, these bundles of shadowy energy that could never exist in our world. And when they come into our world, the way we perceive them is we perceive their energy as a shadow. Now, these shadow people, these hyperdimensional shadow people, uh, they do look humanoid. Um, they do take great care into presenting themselves as something that looks human, that looks like a reflection of us, which I believe it is a reflection of us. Their dimension is, again, it's an adjacent dimension or adjacent universe. That they are a reflection of us, or maybe that we're a reflection of them. I'll let you guys think about that tonight. Are we a reflection of these hyperdimensional beings, or their reflection of us? It's hard. I would like to believe that we're in my opinion, that we're a reflection of them instead of them being a reflection of us. Because they are hideously intelligent. Um, I say that they're malicious, um, but I think they view us as something inferior to them. We're inferior to in our physical universe. We're much more to them. We're inferior creatures to them. Um, we're toys to them. To put it that way. That we're something. Not something they can learn from. I've never heard about one of these hyperdimensional shadow people being curious to want to interact with people to gain knowledge of us and them to share knowledge of themselves with us about them. Um, they don't do that. They don't do that. Uh, exactly. Good point. We're something entertaining to them. We're something new to them because it hasn't been, except for in the last, gosh, I might be stretching it a bit, but I want to say the last 50 years or so. You really haven't heard much about, previously to the last 50 years, you haven't heard much about these malicious hyperdimensional shadow people. It's within the last 50 years, every decade, you're hearing more and more and more people that are encountering these things. You can't make them go away. You can't make them go away. And that's why a lot of paranormal investigators or mystics or, psychic mediums, they'll say, oh, you can't do anything with them. You're just stuck with them. You can try to leave them, but they may follow you. Because what these people are dealing with are these creatures. And they're being misunderstood. They're being mislabeled. They're being mislabeled as perhaps being ghosts of people. And they're not. They're a species unto themselves. A species that's completely alien to our universe. And since I used the word alien, here's the other theory about shadow people, which everybody knows. For those who do not know, I am open to the belief in UFOs or UAPs, to extraterrestrial life, extraterrestrial beings, extraterrestrial contact. I'm open to that. But in all of my travels and all of my experiences, I've never seen a UFO. And I've never encountered an alien, something not of this earth, but is part of our universe that's traveled here. I have never encountered that. I'm not saying that it'll never happen in my lifetime, but I've never encountered it. And some people believe that the shadow people that they experience here on Earth, especially the ones that plague them at night, that come to them at night, and the ones that physically touch and interact with people at night, touching them on their bodies, their heads. It's like they're being examined. That some people believe that these shadow people that are doing this to them at night are aliens, are interplanetary aliens that have come to our world to investigate, to explore. And I use that in quotation marks because usually these alien shadow people that, from the stories that are told, we ain't talking about Captain Kirk. We ain't talking about Captain Picard coming to explore. This ain't the Federation coming here to explore. These things have, how we do tests and how we, experiment on lesser creatures of our earth. And I say lesser in quotation marks, like rats, like monkeys, like dogs, like rabbits. I think that these shadow aliens, these alien shadows, uh, see us as guinea pigs, as their guinea pigs, as we would see guinea pigs in a lab. Um, Earth here is their lab, and they are here to experiment on us. A lot of people believe that. I have never heard of a friendly encounter where somebody felt good about an alien shadow being in their room and interacting with them. Usually, these shadows, people will say, are accompanied by them seeing, at some point the night before, night after, or the night of, they witness something that can only be explained as a UFO in the night sky. And then shortly thereafter, they experience a shadow alien in their house. Usually, from what people say, these shadow aliens are generational. They experiment on multi generations of a family. They'll experiment on the father, the son, the grandson, the great grandson. They follow the entire lines for generations, experimenting on them, and that's how a lot of the stories get passed along about what's going on. Which I personally find shadow people, those alien shadow people, the thought of them absolutely terrifying. Um, I bet you do, Christine. If people saw Christine Day's comment just now, in Australia especially, people see a lot of crazy shit in the night sky down there in Australia. Um, that's one of the few countries that I always wanted to visit but never did was Australia. Um, Mainly because I wanted to go hang out with some of the Aboriginal people in Australia. I did go to New Zealand though, but I didn't go to Australia. I did go to the North Island in New Zealand, but that's a story for another day. I have to tell that story was a lot of fun the time I spent there. But that's when I was leaving Japan, and again, that's another story for another day. As you can see, you know, we're up to three different types of what you would classify as shadow people. Now let's talk about the Inhuman type. Now that's the type that I have had experience in. For those who do not know, a little background for those who do not know. Uh, you know, a lot of people already know this from watching previous videos and who know me personally. That many years ago, when I left the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, here in the United States, and I went out and explored the world and discovered myself, and my faith discovered me. I became a voodoo priest, a Hungan, um, and as such, I was immersed in the culture, the voodoo culture, the Voodoo culture, and the stories and legends that accompany that faith, which my faith accompany the faith. And we have stories about all types of spiritual and supernatural creatures that exist in our world around us. Many, 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 many stories. Some of them kind of funny, kind of fun. Some of the creatures out there kind of funny, harmless, funny things. Some of them that are absolutely terrifying, that you would never want to meet up on in a dark and stormy night. And one of these creatures, that the stories and I heard the stories and legends of, it's called a lemur. That's Lemr, by the way. I'm sure it sounds better with a Haitian accent when you say it. But lemurs are shadowy creatures that live in cemeteries. They live in all cemeteries. They live in the shadows that are cast by the trees in the cemetery. They live in the shadows cast by the tombstones in a cemetery. That is the place in which they are born, and that is the place in which they hunt and look for their prey in. What a lemur does, they feed. They begin. They feed off of tragedy. They feed off of the feeling of emotions. Um, they feed off of pain. They feed off of suffering. They feed off of death, lemurs do, as the story was told to me. As my Macumba told me, I'll have to explain that word one day, what a Macumba is. Uh, but that's a story for another day. But the story was told me by my Macumba. They have no shape until you give them shape. And I never quite understood that. Now, when my teacher, Papa Thomas, died, I went to his funeral, of course, and presided over his burial when he died. And as is tradition, I kept I kept vigil over his grave for 3 days and 3 nights. I did not leave his grave for 3 days and 3 nights. I was there, that if his body did not need it reminding that it was dead, I was there to remind it that it was dead. If his spirit needed reminding that his body was dead, I was there to remind the spirit that its body was dead and it was time for him to move on and seek out the next life. That was, as a Hungan and as a friend of Papa Thomas, it was my honor, my privilege to hold that vigil. Yeah, you do sleep at the gravesite. You do, and this was outside of New Orleans, by the way, for those who do not know, where I knew Papa Thomas from. This was outside of New Orleans. It was outside. It was in the cemetery of the faithful. It was not done in a modern cemetery. It was done in a very natural cemetery where most of the faith would be buried at when they died. Um, and if you know anything about, that part of the South and that part of Louisiana, most of the bodies are buried above ground. They're buried in crypts, or they have stone over top of them, to where if there's a flood, um, the coffin or the body won't wash up to the surface and float down the river, which happens frequently and often in Louisiana, for those who don't know. It's quite a sight seeing the dead coming down the river. That's a story for another day. And it was during that time that I was holding vigil. I was lighting all the candles. I was lighting the 33 candles that I placed around his burial site. Um, I would keep the candles lit during the day and keep the candles lit at night. And for the ones that burned out completely, I would replace them and keep them lit all night. Um, holding vigil there. This is a bad memory. Sorry. I have to stop for a minute every once in a while. It's a bad memory. For those who don't know what paranormal PTSD is, sometimes you experience things that are so horrible in the supernatural and paranormal world. It causes psychological scars, and when you remember them, it's like being there again, and it hurts. The memories hurt when you pull them up again. It's like you're being there all over again. It's pretty bad. This was pretty bad. And I heard something. Now, the cemetery was pitch black except for the candles that were there. And I had not put my head down to rest yet for that night. And I heard them. Just something lightly whispering and moving through the grass right outside of the candlelight. Something small and fast and scurrying. Smaller than a possum, but bigger than a mouse. That was running around. And they would pause, and there was more than one, because they were talking to each other. They were whispering to each other, chittering to each other. And naturally, this was the first night. That got my attention when I heard that. And I took a few of the candles, and I placed them around where I was going to bed down for the night at beside his grave. Bed down before the sun came up, beside his grave. And I placed some of the candles at my feet and above my head so I could see if they were, whatever this was, that I would see it before, it got a chance to touch me. And the entire night before sunrise, that's all I heard was something running around me and running around the graveside, chittering and talking to each other and talking to themselves. Couldn't make out any of the words. It sounded like they were speaking English, but they were speaking it fast, and they were speaking it low to each other. Next day, I was still there holding vigil. couple of friends of mine from the faith came out to see how I was doing with the vigil, being my first vigil and all. They wanted to make sure their Hungan was doing okay. Probably also to check to make sure I was doing everything correctly as well. And I told them what I had heard that night. And was there anything in the bayou that I should know of that would do that? And they said, well, you've heard the tale of the lemur. And looked at him and I went, yeah, I've heard the stories of the lemurs living in the grave sites, but I had not experienced any up to that point. I said, well, they said that's probably a lemur out here. It's probably more than one lemur out here. Um, and the last thing they said to me about the subject was, watch your shadow. And I went, what? And they just repeated, watch your shadow. And they left. Well, that didn't scare the fuck out of me. Well, it kind of did. It scared the fuck out of me. Um, because that night it happened again. Um, but this time I moved in closer to Papa Thomas's grave, and where I would have more light, and I put more candles around myself. And that's when I saw them for the first time. My foot, my left leg, the foot of my left leg was at the very edge of the light of one of the candles. And I saw something reach out of the darkness. It was like a child's hand. Very, except for the finger, it was, it had the proportions of a small child's hand, but the fingers were very long and thin, and it was reaching towards my foot. At first, I couldn't move, and I heard that same chittering sound coming from the darkness. And I heard very clearly when I saw that hand, and I was paralyzed. I was scared shitless. And I saw that hand, and I thought, it's something said, yes. It just said yes. And it was very sibilant. It emphasized the S and yes quite deliberately. And it looked like these long fingers were going to close about my foot. And I pulled back my left foot and I kicked the dirt from the grave towards that hand. It didn't pull back as much as it just poofed, like it wasn't there anymore. It's like the smoke cleared, like the hand was made from smoke, and it just suddenly, a strong wind came through and it cleared. That's what it reminded me of. And that's when I folded my legs underneath me. And I didn't stretch out anymore for the rest of the night. But after that, I didn't hear the whispering from the shadows anymore. I didn't hear the whispering from the darkness anymore. It was incredibly quiet. On the third night, I decided to light more candles and keep them around me. Even more candles. I swear to God, it looked like Methuselah's birthday cake. I had so many candles lit out there around me to illuminate the darkness around me. And it came again. Again, it was more than one of them out there. But this time, with all the candles that I had around me, I was casting more of a shadow. And my shadow fell outside of the ring of candles I had put around myself. I didn't think much of it, but I heard something in the darkness say, "There it is." And again, when it said "is," it emphasized the S, a very sibilant, sneaky way of saying it. And I felt something touch my shadow. It was cold, 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 cold. I could feel, it's like I could feel something step one foot, next foot, and then a hand and another hand reach into my shadow that had gone outside of the circle of light. And it sent this bolt of cold through my shadow up into my body. And God's, it made my heart stop. It was so cold it made my heart stop for a moment, and I couldn't breathe for a moment when it did that. And that's when I heard and I looked to where my shadow was then. And I saw these small yellow pinpricks that can only be described as eyes looking up from me from my shadow. The shadow part that was still within the circle of candles. Apparently the lemur had attached itself to my shadow and was using my shadow to get closer to me. And I saw these two small yellow eyes looking out of my shadow at me. And for the briefest moment, I saw a mouth open and smile at me. Beneath those two small pinprick of yellow eyes. I don't know if I passed out. I don't know, from fear or from the cold that I experienced, or I passed out from fatigue. But I'd collapsed on the ground, and the faithful the next morning found me. It was the last of my vigil anyway, and they came to me. Um, they shook me awake. I woke up, and I jumped up, I should say, and grabbed their arms because I remembered that smile underneath these yellow eyes and the cold I had felt that night. Um, and I saw on the ground where my shadow had left outside of that circle of light, the grass looked like it had been burned. The grass where my shadow had fallen within the circle and then outside the circle. There was a long swath of dead grass, like something had scorched it. And it began and ended with me, where my shadow was cast from it. And I remember Roger looked at me. Oh, I used his name. I try not to use too many names. Rocher looked at me and he said, "You've been touched." And he looked at my left leg. He says, "You've been touched." And on my left leg, there was a small, looked like a bruise at first when you looked at it. But he said, "Look closer at it." It was a small handprint, like a doll had touched my hand. Like the hand of a doll had touched my leg. Um, he says, "The lemur touched you last night." He says, "Are you feeling okay?" He says, "Can you feel your leg?" And that's when I noticed that I couldn't feel my leg. My left leg had gone numb and was still numb, and I couldn't feel my leg. Um, he said, "It took something from you." I said, "Roger, what the hell are you talking about? What did it take from me?" He said, "It took part of you from you. It'll look like you. If you see it again, it'll make itself look like you. It'll look like a shadow you. It took a piece of you to give itself life, to give itself form, to give itself shape, in which to bring fear to other people." I said, "Well," he says, "it's connected to you and will stay connected to you." He said, "Until it's done what it needs to do." And I said, "Well, what the hell does it need to do?" He says, "It's going to try to scare you to death. It's going to try to kill you. It will scare you to death. It will plague you. But it will look like you when it comes to you. You will see yourself as a shadow coming towards yourself. It will be a shadow form of you." And I said, "Well, how the fuck do I get rid of that?" I said, "No one's ever taught me on how to deal with that." Well, he showed me what I needed to do. It was a ritual to disconnect this lemur, this shadow creature, this shadow that had now become was going to be a shadow person. He showed me how to disconnect it from my leg. Um, it ended with, and I'm going to show it to you guys if I can. It ended with a tattoo being placed upon my leg. It's an Ouroboros tattoo. Shit. Try not to show you guys my ding dong. Fuck. You can see part of it. Oh, you can see part of the scar that's left on there too. Um, but what the tattoo did was at the end, and that was a painful ass tattoo too. It acted as a seal that broke the connection between me and the lemur, that it would not be able to follow me or haunt me. He said I needed to get that done before the sun set again, so he took me back, back to the house, and we did our ritual, and then he administered the tattoo in the traditional way with a bone needle and a little hammer, and that hurt like fuck. um, and he finished sealing my leg. Now the bruise mark did not go away for almost a year. It stayed on my leg for almost a year during the time. But I didn't get the feeling back to my leg until after the tattoo was finished. When he finished the tattoo, I could feel my leg again. I could, it's like all the numbness ended. The paralysis in my leg ended. I could start to feel my leg again. My leg felt warm again. It didn't feel cold or anything. It was warm again. Um, but that's how he severed me from a shadow person, a shadow thing, a shadow predator. That's what I prefer to call it. Well, guys, it looks like we've come um, to that magical hour again. I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. I want to thank everybody who'll be watching the replay. If you like what you've seen tonight or heard tonight, please hit the like button, that thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down. But if you hit the thumbs down, at least provide me with a little bit of input on how I can improve my next show. I do take constructive criticism rather well. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Twitter. It's at VoodooMan3, or if you look up Mike the Naked Bigfoot or the Naked Bigfoot as a hashtag, you will find me. If you haven't already, please, if you feel like it, please go back to some of my previous videos and watch them. You may find some more that you do enjoy. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed tonight's chilling little tale. This is What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. I am your host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. If you've been playing our drinking game, please do not drink and drive. If you want to go out in the world, I do encourage you to go out and explore our wonderful magical world, but please do it again safely and sanely. And until next time, have a fantastic night.